shrink our footprint as far as office space goes, which has a financial impact on us. And so overall, I think it's been it's brought out some positive things for our business.
And as I mentioned earlier, I had two businesses, and much like what I believe Sarah said, initially there was a real fear factor where business just froze, especially at my UPS store, where no one knew what was going on. My older employees all stayed home, and there's just a lot of fear. And then a month later, everybody was shipping toilet paper to their family in Montana, and we boomed, right? And so at the UPS store, our growth is the highest ever, ironically, and I never would have foreseen that coming. Now, on the other hand, I also owned a cafe called Munchkin Playland that catered towards parents with little kids. And that whole business model relied on 2-year-olds climbing on play equipment stacked on top of each other during really busy winter days. And so I had to make the gut-wrenching decision to shut that down because my lease was up. There was so much a lack of clarity on when things were going to pick up again. And so it was 10 to 11 years of investment and time and sweat and tears all down the drain. And that was pretty brutal. But my mourning period is over now. That was way back in September, so I'm kind of stopped feeling sorry for myself and I'm ready to carry on. But it was a very difficult choice, especially when you start your own business from scratch. It's almost like having a kid. Every little decision that you made, from the design, layout, growing your customer base, it all goes away. So that was my pro and con experience with COVID. UPS store is doing great, and the other one's gone, and now it's just going on to the next steps.
Thank you, all four of you, answering that. It's some interesting information for sure. And Dave, I am sorry about that. I bet that was really hard, actually.
Yeah, it's all right. I've recovered, but
that's good. So Ken, this one's more for you. What would be a different career path you could or would suggest for a welder? And Sarah, of course, if you have any suggestions as well.
Yeah, we found out earlier that Sarah actually did welding, which is probably more than I've ever done when it comes to welding. I just employ welders, but I thought this was a good question, because there are trades like welding and even carpentry where they're physically demanding positions, and quite honestly, welding requires good eyesight to be a really good welder. Because you have to be able to read the bead of metal that you're laying down on steel to make sure that the weld is going to be strong. In most cases, we'll have to pass some type of test to make sure that the weld is structurally strong enough to hold. And so as the body ages, that becomes harder and harder, and that's true for carpenters as well. Their bodies break down. They're on their knees a lot. They're up and down moving, and as you get older, to be able to function and do those type of jobs takes a lot of physical endurance that some people have better than others. I probably wouldn't do well in that field, quite honestly, because I already have bad eyesight. I have to put on reading glasses in order to read most of the time, even fairly decent sized print. So I think what I would recommend in those type of professions in particular is to look further down the road. How do you extend those careers? And I think if you look at welding also, what most employers are looking for when you're looking at a welder is a fabricator, somebody who can actually assemble and create something. Well, with those skills require blueprint reading, which can easily translate into a estimator or a project manager position as well. Because those are the same skill sets that those positions would need. In welding, you can also advance to metallurgy. So you could be a metallurgist, which is a higher paying job. You'll be a better metallurgist if you actually know how to weld, because those two functions are critical. Also, inspectors are another field down the line. And those are in high demand, short supply positions currently. So in order to get a welder to extend their career or even move past that, having that skill set should translate to a job down the road. And that's what I would recommend. And same with construction. A carpenter could also, look down the road as a project manager and an estimator, a site superintendent. Those positions should be what we should be looking to advance people in the trades into, because somebody has the actual carpentry skills just makes a better superintendent, makes a better foreman, makes a better project manager. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Ken. Sarah, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Oh, it's kind of funny to bring back metallurgy. So I have an associate's degree in metallurgy from way back. But like Ken was saying, those things really translate. The two jobs, I think that I would add to that mix. One that I did when I was in the Air Force. So non-destructive inspection, when he talked about inspecting, the welding experience was very helpful, obviously, in inspecting welds. So NDI is an important one. I mean, Boeing has those jobs. There's actually, if you are interested in cars, in automotive at all, there are many careers. I mean, you can use those NDI skills there. And then, obviously QA as well. Many companies need someone to QA kind of develop. And so having the aptitude that you learn from the details, that you learn from being a detailed person, which is very important in welding, can be translatable skills as well. You may not necessarily have done something, but you can speak to the transferable skill of detail orientation and how you learned your welding skill and how you can bring those forward into a near career path. So.
And I should have also, that was a great comment, Sarah, and actually you probably have, like I said, more practical knowledge than I do when it comes down entrepreneur or a business owner, because I think both of those trades fall into a position where you be your own general contractor. In construction or in welding, you could be your own fab shop or welding institution as well. So I mean, those I look at almost any training as a starting ground, and where you take it from there, whether it be welding, whether it be a title company, whether it be a restaurant, or when you learn a trade, I don't think anybody really looks at it as that's where I stop for the rest of my life. Now, there are some people that will do that, but for the most part, is a progression to where you ultimately end up, where you might retire or step away from the workforce someday. So I think any position, you should really look at it as a stepping stone to the next. But that's my opinion, and but that's what I've 33 years of finding people work. That's what I see all the time is people are always progressing to the next level.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you. Great answers, actually. So what are you looking for on an application or resume that would stand out to you to ensure you invite them in for an interview?
For me, it's all about timing and consistency. We never know when we're going to need to go through a hiring surge, and in this industry, we definitely go through those where we need a lot of people, and then there are times where it staves off because our business tends to fluctuate with the real estate market, of course. So when real estate's doing great, we need more hands in our operation, and when real estate goes through a lull, we stop hiring, obviously. So consistency is really important if it's something that you're really interested in. If you've heard about a position and you are pursuing that and you haven't gotten something else, or you want to, stay on that career path, then consistency and checking in with the hiring manager is important in keeping your resume and interest at the forefront. I don't know that there's necessarily anything on a resume for me that would say, I have to hire that person, with the exception of in this business, what we do is learned like any trade. It's not rocket science. The biggest thing for us here is customer service, drive, a heart to serve people and do whatever it takes to get the job done. So some of the things that I look for specific to this industry is if you've had experience at some of the really top-rated customer service companies like Nordstrom, Starbucks, anything that really stands out like that probably piques my interest a little bit more, although that is definitely specific, I think, to this particular industry.
So I do a lot of recruiting for our clients and for, here in our company as well. The thing that I look for in a resume is I am really looking for outcomes. It isn't just a task list of things that you've done in your past. I really want to know, if you did customer service, what was the impact? So I kind of suggest that people treat it almost like a math equation. I did this and this was the outcome. So this plus this equaled this. And if you're a person who likes math, I think you can kind of think of it as sort of a linear activity. And it's an easy thing that you can put on your resume as well. Almost like if you're familiar with Excel at all, make a little graph for yourself. You're looking for this, you employer are looking for this, and you can get that information off the job ad. This is what I've done. So you need this, I've done this, this naturally would equate to success. So it's kind of a tip that might be helpful to you as you're putting together either your cover letter or your resume. Because I'm always looking like, it's all great that you did these tasks, but did it really impact anyone in any positive way? Or, did you, what was the revenue? How many people did you serve? Or did you serve 2 people? Volume, those kind of things matter. So it might be something for you to think about.
Yeah, I would say, tradespeople are not typically known for resumes, but in our situation, we recommend applicants to look at some of the templates that are out there. They'll help format a resume in a concise order. But I think more importantly, especially in today's environment, I would look at more of the social recruiting tools that most recruiters are going after, and that would be like LinkedIn is a prime example of one of those. So when you create a LinkedIn profile, treat it as an online resume. And there's a behind the door function to LinkedIn that recruiters tap into. And most of that is done off of keywords. So if you're applying for a specific industry that has buzzwords that are used within that industry, highlight those into your LinkedIn profile. They'll come up in searches that we're looking for specific functions, and that's true. I deal with industrial, and we do everything from vice presidents of manufacturing companies down to unskilled labor. But we are searching for keywords. Our recruiters are always searching for those keywords for different functions that are related to the industry that they're applying for, and that's true with staffing across the board. The other option, and this is a plug for my industry, and I'm just going to be very candid about that, but we used to be called temporary agencies more. That was a phrase that we would normally use, but that became a misnomer about 20 years ago, where most of the positions that come through staffing firms or temporary agencies at that time were permanent positions. They were temp to hire, direct hires, which is like a headhunting fee for hire positions. And so, we're incentivized to get people to work. So if you want to apply to, from one company to one company from one company to the next, that's one process. You can go to a staffing firm or 3 staffing firms or 4 staffing firms and hit hundreds of companies through their client list. And again, we're motivated to get you to work. So we will coach you on how to do the interview with the client, because most of our positions, we just don't send somebody out. You actually interview with our staff, but then we'll probably send you to a client to be interviewed as well. So it is another step that I don't think most people think about, but staffing firms are very motivated. Now, one caveat, if a staffing firm, and this, I haven't seen this in a long, long time, but there have been some sleazy staffing firms out there that will try to charge the applicant a fee to get a job. Don't ever apply with that company. You should never have to pay a fee. Usually the fees are always client-based. So if there is a position available through a staffing firm and they want you to pay something to get that job, walk away, because it's not legitimate.
All of them had great answers. I kind of want to lean towards what not to do. Sometimes you have a stack of 100 resumes. I don't need to see your name in a glorious calligraphy fonts. I don't need to see a lame objective that has nothing to do with what I'm hiring for. I don't need to see any typos, right? Because when you have a stack of 100 resumes, those go into the reject pile because you didn't take the time or care to do the basics. So, you know, everyone had a great answer. I just want to remind, especially folks that are typing up the resume for the first time, take care of the basics. Otherwise, you're just going to go in the reject pile and probably never know why. So bring your resume to a trusted relative, someone that's been in business, so they can give you an honest answer there.
I would add, and I just really do want to double down maybe on what David was talking about. I think people just are embarrassed probably to have somebody else read their resume, and you end up with typos on your resume. Please don't say that you're a detailed oriented person and then in the next sentence say that you and then have a typo. It's just such bad form, and it can be so easily corrected if you ask for some help, and people will help you. People will proofread for you. So do take David's advice.
Not to have a, you know, a big plug here, but Career Services, you just email your resume to careerservices@clark.edu, and we will have somebody take a look at that for you and also schedule a Zoom meeting to run through your resume and cover letter with you. So please email us, careerservices@clark.edu, so we can get those detail-oriented things in there. Yep, that's my shameful plug there. Shameless. All right, next question. Do any of your companies offer internships or apprenticeships? If so, how would a student apply?
My company does offer, at least in welding, we have a apprenticeship model that's registered with the Department of Labor. So that one we usually pull from our current labor pool to see who's interested. They have to express an interest to join that apprenticeship. It is a 4-year apprenticeship. We obviously pay the employee as they go through, and they get stepped up based on the level of apprenticeship that they obtain through both on the job and classroom experience. And so, you know, it's a more structured approach. We also have one in machining and millwright as well. So those are apprenticeships that we have, and those are more with our client base. And again, we pull from our existing client base. Now, as a chair of the workforce board for the state of Oregon, you know, I advocate for registered apprenticeship. And when I say registered apprenticeship, that is something that is registered through the Department of Labor. It's an added level of scrutiny that you have to go through as an employer. But that registers it as a training program, and it sets what those standards are. In addition, it's now registered nationally. So if you ever left the state of Oregon or Washington and went to another state, any employer would be able to pull up what type of training you had in those disciplines. Apprenticeship is a model that was typically seen as union, but we're now going into non-traditional apprenticeship models. You're going to see them in Oregon and medical. We're taking RNs that have associate's degrees and moving them up to baccalaureates. You're seeing it in Oregon and Washington under about 6 IT disciplines. So again, training somebody up into other levels of either programming, cybersecurity. I mean, there's several different positions. So registered apprenticeship is something that's acceptable in our country, and we're trying to bring back into full force. Even in Oregon, we're just in the process now of starting a youth apprenticeship model that's going to start in the high schools and go into the community colleges. And that we're just in the early stages of that in Oregon, but I'm pretty sure in Washington, they already have an existing model. And I can tell you across the country, there's a whole bunch of other states that are moving into the youth apprenticeship model. So if you were looking for an apprenticeship to apply to, in Oregon, that would be through the Bureau of Labor Industries, or BOLI. They have their own website, and you can pull up all the employers that have registered apprenticeship models, and you can apply directly to those programs. The community college is another great resource. I'm sure Clark Community College has some apprenticeship models as well, and I would research those through the college. And then in Washington, I would just Google apprenticeships in the state of Washington, and you'll probably see a list of resources to apply for those type of positions. So that would be my recommendation.
We offer internships. We don't offer an apprenticeship. We're a pretty small company, about 110 employees. Mostly what we've done with the VRC there at Clark is had veterans come out and do job shadowing, because somebody here does something that is needed in every small company. People come and do a lot of job shadowing. So if you wanted to know what it was like to, do web build, if you really wanted to, or, write content, or, print marketing or web market, whatever it happens to be, HR, you can come and do job shadowing. We do occasionally offer internships as well. Depends on how we want to build out the program or what people need. People come here to do a lot of project work as well, to work with somebody. So it just kind of depends on what a person needs, but we're happy to kind of talk through that individually.
And we don't offer any at this time, but we are working with Clark College on opening up some opportunities in the near future.
And we're so tiny that we don't offer anything like that.
All right. Well, something to consider. You never know. Could happen in the future. All right. So you kind of went over this, each of you, in the previous question, but if you had to give one main tip to a student about ensuring their portfolio is attractive to employers, what might that be?
Relevance. I mean, you can pretty much make any of your experience relevant to the employer if you've paid attention to what the employer's needs are. So you have to demonstrate an interest. For us, it would be an interest in medical practices. It would be an interest in the particular position, the discipline, and how that would relate to building small businesses, because that's who we work with. So I'm always looking for relevance. And we hire people who are web designers and do lots of writing. So from a true portfolio perspective, we have graphic designers. We have a bunch of those folks, and their portfolio ought to have some relationship to the type of work that we're doing, whether that's print or online, looking at different kind of content. So you probably should have looked at our website and made some connection there.
I agree completely. While I said that I look for somebody in a service industry, know the job you're applying for, and you can pretty much tailor your experience to any type of job. You just have to find that connection and make sure that it's clear to the employer how it's relevant to the job you're applying for.
Yeah, I would emphasize social media again. I think it will help you get a job, but it will also prevent you from getting a job. So you should be very aware of what you post on Facebook and who you have grant access to Facebook, especially if you're going to be making statements that might be controversial or might create an employer to take a second chance or a second look at you as maybe somebody you want to pass on. But then also on the plus side, look at opportunities like I mentioned earlier with LinkedIn, and truly treat it as a electronic resume. Because I can tell you right now, recruiters are all over LinkedIn looking for people. And if you don't have a LinkedIn page, I highly recommend you do that. I know it's not the traditional social one that you would have with Facebook, where you share with friends and ideas and baby pictures of grandchildren, which I now have. But it is probably the number one tool that an employer is using for recruiting, especially on heavily recruited companies. And so put on a picture, a professional picture. Make sure that you use, again, those keywords that are pertinent to the industry that you're searching for, and just treat it as any other tool that you would when you're applying, because it will do work for you if you set it up right. And again, anything you do that might trigger an employer to pass on you, you have to think what they're going to see on those type of pages.
Yeah, I think relevance and experience is kind of a chicken or the egg type of thing. You could be the greatest graphic designer, but if you just do it as a hobby in your bedroom, that doesn't matter to an employer. But if you're curious and you go every avenue you can think of, right? Let's say your local Little League baseball team needs a volunteer graphic designer. Well, go out and do it. And now you have an organization and reference that can help you become a graphic designer. Don't stop there. Do it in your any college club or any avenue, but just try to get that relevance by being curious and observe and go out and find a way to represent an organization, and then that becomes resume worthy.
All right, those are all great tips. Thank you. So this question came in, and I'm gonna ask it, but I'm not 100% sure if it's worded correctly how the student wanted, and I don't know who asked it. So if it was you, please pipe in. But what do employers really want the employees to want? So if that makes sense to you, how it's written, please answer it. If it does not, I'm hoping the student may clarify if they're in here.
Well, that's maybe I'm interpreting that question wrong. So if I am, somebody can correct me on it. But I think it's also what employers want in addition to what an employee would want, and that's somebody that works well in a team. They like creative thinkers, problem solvers, but they prefer people that want to be part of a culture of a company. I think it was Josie that said, that there's going to be more remote jobs in her company going forward, and I think that's true in certain industries. You're going to see it. And remote jobs do well in an existing workforce where you have a person that's already been doing that job and can do it from their home or whatever location they want to work at. But when you're bringing on new people and training new people, remote training does not work. It is extremely difficult. It usually burns out both the applicant and the employer. And so at some point, there's going to be a transition to bring people back into some type of work environment, because also culture is taught when you bring somebody new into a company, what their philosophy is, what their company values are. And that's also hard to teach somebody remotely. So I think, some of the things that I've experienced over the years when I've had people that have been remotely working, and that's mostly our recruiters, because recruiters could work, across the world if they wanted to. But they miss that social interaction, that part of being a team. And the isolation drives people crazy, quite honestly. So some people work well in that environment, but for the most part, humankind is meant to be social and interactive. And so even though our society has changed in the last year, I think you're going to see a more transition back to some of those office positions over the next few years.
I didn't hear from the student, so they may not be in here, but if any of the other three may have any thoughts on that question.
I think for my industry and probably many others, we want new employees to come in with a good attitude, come in with an openness to learn and to adapt and embrace the culture that exists. Like I said, for a lot of trades, including mine, the actual work that we do on a day-to-day basis is all learned. So it's not that you have to come in with any knowledge of what title insurance is. For me, I thought we would, help people transfer car titles when I first started, and we don't do anything that has to do with car titles. But my point is coming in with just kind of the openness of, hey, I'm going to put in the hard work. This particular industry, that's really what it rewards, is if you're willing to put in the time, the energy, you do a good job and you have a good attitude, you'll go really far in this business. And that's all it takes.
I always like to say you can't teach people to care, right? And I can tell within 5 minutes of talking to someone or training someone by the questions they ask, by their nonverbal cues, if they really give a rip. And this goes back from my Intel days, even when I was a teenager working in fast food. You can tell the person who wants to try, who cares about doing a good job. So go into an industry or a work environment where your values align with the job scope, so you genuinely care about your output.
I think that's a really good point. I guess I'll play the devil's advocate that David did earlier too about the things. It is also something to remember that not every job is for every person. And so if you find that you are not aligned either with the culture or the interest, the actual technical activity that might be going on in that environment, please actually, kind of pull up your bootstraps and say, this thing isn't for me, and have a conversation with your manager and say, this isn't for me. How can we transition out of this so that I can go find something that is going to be a better fit for me? You're going to be happier. The employer is going to be happier. You're going to skip a lot of unnecessary negativity if you just acknowledge that not every job is right for every person, and you need to find the right one for you.
I think those are great answers. Thank you. So next one is, are you open to having students conduct an informational interview with you or a job shadow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We'll collect your contact information at the end and we'll send it out. All right. That was a quick question. What has been your most rewarding experience in your career?
I guess I'll go on that one. For me, on the day-to-day, the most rewarding thing for me is bringing new people into the organization and building them up. The people in my business are what generate revenue for the company. And because we're a trade, we all come in, all of us pretty much start at the bottom. I started as a temp receptionist myself. And so identifying talent and bringing people in and then promoting them as quickly as they're able to excel, that for me is the most rewarding thing about my job.
I guess I can go next. So most of my career has been spent working with small businesses in a small business. And so for me, maybe to kind of what Josie was saying, I'm really get excited about bringing people on who want to work with small business and grow small business. That is where jobs are created. And so I get really excited about the growth that we are able to support and provide to these medical practices that we work with. When they're able to add staff, they have really strong patient retention. Those are all things that add to our economy. And that is it's a pretty awesome space for me to be in. So I've always been pretty excited about being in a small business, working with small business. So.
Oh, my dog is in my office. We have a dog-friendly office. We have 3 dogs running around right now. So I had to mute myself just because I didn't want to. I think my dog had something he wanted to add to the conversation, but I didn't. Anyways, honestly, I've been truly blessed. I get to work with great people. It's a family business. My children are in my family business. And I'm transitioning out and they're transitioning in. So we're going through that process as well. But one of the things I've found over the 30 years, we've employed, in my career, we've probably tens of thousands of people we've put through into different jobs and different careers. In a year's time, we employ about 4,000 people. There are challenges and difficulties, and I think everybody spoke about some of those being in business that you face. But it's amazing how those challenges kind of melt away to the background when you have something that really lifts you up. And what I find lifts me up is when we make the right connection and get somebody in the right career. That eliminates probably about every 10. For every one of those, it eliminates every 10 bad experiences we have for some reason. So, and I think that's where our recruiters really find joy, is that when you make that connection, you help that person find a passion in their life or a career that they were looking for. There's a lot of things I could do for a living, but that to me is the number one thing that I enjoy the most.
What was gratifying for me, it's selfish in a way. When I left Intel, I bought a UPS store. It was great to own a business, but it wasn't mine. It was a franchise. So when I started the cafe that caters towards parents with little children, everything from branding to the layout of the store to building the customer base from scratch, everything was from the bottom floor. And to develop it into a viable business was by far the most gratifying thing that I've done.
Right. Thank you. So how does an interviewee stand out to you in an interview? Or how would they?
Actually, just through enthusiasm about wanting the job stands out to me. And that usually comes out fairly quickly in an interview process. I mean, most people are, are a little bit frightened of the interviewer, but I can tell you from being on the other end of that, it's also a little bit stressful interviewing somebody. And so to be calm and relaxed during an interview, but also express your passion on what you want, that truly comes through in an interview really quickly. If you focus on that, if your main point is what I'm looking for and being honest. And I think it was Sarah that mentioned it, that if it's not right for you, you don't want to fake your way into a job that you're not going to be happy with. So being honest and open, and now some people take that to the extreme, but use common sense and also realize that they're looking for you as an employee, but you're also looking at them as an employer. So that open flow and your passion will come through. And if it does, it makes it really easy for the company to hire you.
Yeah, take a deep breath, and if you can, just relax and make it conversational. The more I think that you can connect just on a conversational and human-to-human level, I think that benefits you and how the interviewer feels about you, versus just answering the question and then stopping. It's give them some background, tell them how you feel about a certain topic as it relates to the questions that they're asking you, but really just kind of creating that rapport and helping to create a rapport with the interviewer.
I think I think if also kind of from an equation standpoint, I think if you could answer the question, why you and why now, if you gave it, maybe 7 minutes worth of thought to be able to answer that question. And if you practiced with somebody, if maybe, one of your colleagues or family members, why should I choose you? If you're able to answer that question authentically, that's the kind of thing that I think most recruiters are looking for. And I think what all of us have said is that all comes out pretty quickly. That's like your first, second question. And we're going to know pretty quickly if you can, if you're actually emotionally attached to the actual answer that is being presented.
I think Sarah stole my thunder by using the word authenticity. That's what I look for. I mean, it sounds like a silly analogy, first date, but you don't want the whole conversation to be stilted and awkward like many of my first dates, right? You want it to go smoothly and be able to just have a conversation about, in my case, the store, about business, about COVID, about your life, but have a good ability to carry a conversation and have it segue into the job needs that the employer is looking into. Because if it's awkward from the beginning, we're all human as interviewers, it'll leave a bad taste in our mouth.
Yeah, I should add one more thing too, and this is a plug for the college, because the fact that you're all enrolled in a institution like Clark Community College already puts you ahead of probably about 60% of the people out there looking entering the workforce, because you're showing an interest in learning and advancing yourself. So you already have a leg up. And I was elected to the board of directors of Portland Community College, so I understand the power of the institution of a college. And so when you are paying for your education now, you should utilize that institution to help you get a job. You're getting an education, but their job is to get you into a job, into a career, into something you want. So reach out to your instructors, reach out to the counselors. This process right here is one of those. And I commend everybody that took an opportunity to be here on this webinar or Zoom meeting. Those are the type of things that will get you advanced. And the fact that you're trying to utilize your institution to help you get a job, everybody should be doing that. That's enrolled at Clark Community College, because you're paying for it. And you're already showing that you have initiative beyond a lot of people in the workforce. So take that advantage and keep moving forward with it.
And I was going to add to make sure you're dressed appropriately for the interview, or nicer. Nothing for me. I had a gal come in for an interview once with jean shorts and flip flops on, and it's a professional environment in here. So even our customers were like, who is this lady walking in? And perhaps she didn't know. But I would just say, keep that in mind. You want to dress how you think is appropriate, or probably a little bit nicer going into a business.
Yeah, those are definitely all great tips. Thank you. And again, I just want to do that plug for Career Services. We're happy to do a practice interview with you. And please email us careerservices@clark.edu. We also have career advisors that would be happy to meet with you to help you find that career path and do your plan. So, all right, next question. So these now are a few added questions from the participants. So I'm going to ask them because we do have time. We still will have the Q&A at the end, but how has COVID-19 affected the hiring process?
Well, we're not doing as many in-office interviews. We're starting to get back into that, but the Department of Labor changed some of the rules on the I-9 forms and having to fill those out in person. But we are doing more back in office appointments, but we expect people to follow the COVID protocols when you're in an interview. It has made it difficult. Like I said, we have a lot of people ghosting us on positions and accepting offers and not showing up or canceling interviews. It's more of a challenge. I don't know what causes that, but it definitely has been a bigger challenge, and it's definitely a strain on our recruiters because they're under pressure to fill positions and would prefer somebody to be candid with them from the very beginning instead of leading them on and then dropping off at the last minute. So again, it goes back to that honesty approach and being honest what you can and cannot do.
Yes. I would say for us, the change in COVID, to Ken's point, you can't meet, so having in-office appointments is not really a thing, but we might be recruiting for somebody in New York or North Carolina, so we weren't having them in the office anyway. So early on in COVID, we had really transitioned to Teams. So Microsoft Teams has been just a real benefit to us, and being able to make more frequent connections face to face than we might have if it was previous days of just a phone call, kind of that phone interview. So this is, I think, just provided a different way of making personal connections. I will say, to Ken's point, we have the same issue kind of with medical assistant positions, front office positions, a lot more ghosting, which was maybe more similar to pre-pandemic times when the unemployment rate was really low. So we're seeing some of those things kind of come back in the medical space, just as businesses come back. So kind of low unemployment rate in those areas.
So yeah, being a small little business that we are, we didn't have much of an impact at all. We can just have a conversation one-off. We don't have a large hiring force.
Same. We just continue following all of our COVID protocols, masks. We have plexiglass shields, make sure we're distanced, but the interview process hasn't changed at all.
Yeah. I would say, going back to Ken's earlier comment about training, though, while the hiring process maybe has had some improvements, at least for us, and or isn't much different, we have people coming into the office, at least when we're hiring here for our office, people come in, pick up their computer and go home. And so have not had the opportunity to make relationships with people because they're not hanging out at the water cooler. So for those of you who are looking for jobs in businesses that aren't yet back, maybe they're still socially distanced, working from home, that's going to be your biggest challenge. And so figuring out what your process is going to be and really digging deep into your inner extrovert. If you're an introverted person, this is going to be really hard for you, but you're going to have to make yourself a little plan, a little checklist of outreach, because it's hard to learn in this environment. If you're a new employee, new industry, new anything, when all of your colleagues, you don't know them, you might be embarrassed to call and ask a question. You're just going to have to do it. So So some of that is going to be hard for you.
You know, that's a great comment, Sarah, because I was reading up on this and a couple of studies on it, that this pandemic has created a certain amount of agoraphobia in our society to a certain degree, and social anxieties about meeting people face to face again. And I don't think that's across the board. I'm definitely not in that category. I'm on the opposite end of that. My wife gets frustrated because it takes me forever to walk the dog around the block because I talk to everybody in my pathway. But I do see that. And we've had multiple people that have accepted a position and then the anxiety got too great before the start of that job happened and backed out. And so there are going to be challenges going forward. It has created, whether it's the fear of the pandemic that's created some of it, or if it's just the way we've stopped practicing social behaviors and interactions to a certain degree, that we've gotten, you know, in some ways comfortable not interacting, and we have to break that trend. And just as, you know, I do a certain amount of public speaking sometimes, and I don't really enjoy that. And there's a fear of doing public speaking, but the more you do it, the more relaxed you become at it. Well, that's the same with going to work day in and day out. If you don't go into an office and meet with people, after a while, you lose that ability to do that to some degree. And it becomes more of an anxiety for you to go into a room with people that you don't necessarily see all the time. So it's going to be a challenge going forward. And it's definitely, this pandemic has changed behaviors to a certain degree. And like as Sarah said, you're going to have to overcome some of that as we begin to open up as an economy again, and people start going back to normal routines and vaccines become more prevalent. So just something to think about.
I think those are great comments for sure. I know that for myself, I'm very outgoing, very much a social butterfly. But the first time I went to the grocery store after we had been fully quarantined, I remember I was like, are they interact? Like, I was kind of freaking out, even though I'm a very social butterfly. So it is interesting how you're right. Our social interaction and feelings about it have definitely changed, and hopefully we get back. So have cybersecurity threats affected your business in part due to COVID and remote operations? Maybe
well,
not.
We're in the medical field. So the medical field has its own cyber processes through HIPAA, through high tech. So these are just, you know, laws that we have to follow. So as people have transitioned, maybe if the biller is working from home, people have to remind themselves to use encrypted technology. And that is a real challenge for us. So it's not that it wasn't required before, it's just getting people to kind of change their mindset, that it's really important to protect your data. And then of course, we've seen a ton more spam email. We've seen some really crazy things happen with spam.
We've definitely seen that. I just recently had an employee got taken for $1,400, thought it was an email from me saying that I needed you to go out and buy something on a gift card. And, you know, I was kind of surprised, but she was going through a stressful situation, and I had, this is an employee I hadn't had a chance to meet yet. And so she just was afraid that she didn't do it, she might get fired, not knowing who I really was. And so we had to put out an email, and there's several employees I haven't met yet. And so, you know, I had to put out emails. Anything comes from me, not, you know, pick up a phone, call me and have a conversation, because I will definitely never ask you for anything other than to do your job. And quite honestly, our system has been attacked substantially. We've gone to more cloud computing to begin with, but we also moved our phone systems onto the cloud-based, so that people can work from home easier and not give up their identity because they won't be using their home lines or our cell phone lines to make calls. And so that has helped. And I will say, as the chair of the workforce board for the state of Oregon, cybersecurity is a growing demand for positions. And so there's a great need for that. And when I was on the board of directors for Portland Community College, the amount of attacks that the college got through cyber attacks from not only Eastern and Western Europe, but also some of the Asian countries, it would blow your mind. And I'm sure Clark Community College is getting those exact same attacks. And because the colleges accept payment over the internet, typically through credit card for enrollment, they fall under the same standards of a banking institution. And so protecting that information is highly critical to a college in particular. So if you're even interested or considering anything in cybersecurity, trust me, there's a lot of demand for that right now.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten worse since COVID hit. As part of the financial services industry, we're highly regulated already. So our company has very advanced cybersecurity protocol and systems in place. Another thing our company does proactively is we'll send fake phishing emails to try and basically test our employees so that they get used to seeing that type of thing and know when not to click on a link. So for us, COVID hasn't really challenged us more in that way because we're very secure and protected. However, we've seen a lot more attempts. And so wire fraud is a prevalent in our industry and growing more and more each year exponentially. People are losing millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in the course of a year to wire fraud. So it's something that we always have to be vigilant about, but thankfully, at least for our industry, we're well protected and we're familiar with it already.
One nice part of being a franchise is that there's a central IT department. So all this cybersecurity stuff is completely I have no transparency to it, and I'm glad. So that's part of where my royalties go to pay for that sort of stuff. So I'm kind of fortunate that way.
That's good. You lucked out there, like you said. So in case anybody doesn't know that's on here, we do have a cybersecurity bachelor's program at Clark. So please make sure to look into that, just since we're talking about it. I see you laughing at me, Kath. Sorry. I just like to do my little plugs. All right. So how do students manage the requirement for previous experience when they are new in the field? How would you suggest that they would manage that on their resume?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure.
I had flipped on my.
Yeah, it was probably me. I paused in the middle. So how do students manage the requirement for previous experience when they are new in the field?
Well, since I asked you to say it one more time, I'll at least give you my input quickly and get off. I think the best thing is to, on any work history, it doesn't have to necessarily pertain to the job you're applying for, but if you can relate prior work history to what you hope to be doing in the future, that is helpful for one. And that could be as simple as being a part of a social activity or a group that you might have belonged to, a sports program that you might have participated in, and tying that in, whether that be leadership, whether that be teamwork, whether that be a continuation of wanting to learn. I think the fact that you're in an institution, you're already in a program trying to learn a career, that is already understandable to a lot of employers. But again, to highlight some of the soft skills that employers have repeated over and over again of being a part of a team, being a creative thinker, being somebody that is willing to show up day in and day out and not always look for opportunities to be away from work. Those are the things that employers are really looking for: dependability, reliability, teamwork. So spotlight those on anything you put on a resume.
And on top of that, I would say leverage your contacts. If you have any contacts that can give you a referral, that goes a long way when you're missing that experience, depending on the job opening and the position. Or if you know somebody that works inside of the company that is willing to give you a referral, I would say to the best that you can, find those people that will speak highly of you.
And just remember that it doesn't matter if it's paid work. It doesn't have to be paid work. You could have babysat You could, and kind of what Ken was saying, you could have worked on a sports team. Those are all contributors to things like customer service and timeliness. And you showed up, you delivered. Same thing with projects that you work on, depending on where you are in the project. Don't be the person on the team who kind of left the other 4 people hanging. You want to be a person who can speak to, I was on a team, we had a project at the school, we worked on delivering the, this capstone program, for example, and here was what my contribution was. That's something you can speak to. It goes to ownership. Those are a lot of behavioral elements that are so important in starting out your career. We all know that you don't have any technical skill yet. We're really looking, do you have the behavioral aptitude to grow and deliver, and what our business needs are?
And I mentioned this earlier, taking initiative. Josie mentioned, poking around to all your contacts. And I use the example, if you're a graphic designer, and you don't have any formal experience, you've never had a paid job, I don't know if you go to church, maybe they need a graphic designer, work for free, go to your local sports club like Ken talked about. Just to keep probing, keep looking, and sooner or later, it might take 100 tries, but you'll find one avenue that will hopefully give you some genuine experience that's relevant to what you're putting on your resume.
I'll add to that, and I'll give you my own example as well. Since we started, my dad started the family business 33 years ago. Like I said, I was with him and my older brother Paul at that time. Unfortunately, my father passed away last year, but for the last, almost from the very beginning, he had some health issues. They took him out of the business ultimately. So growing a business was a challenge, and expanding things over time have been a challenge. But in that time, I've served on the Washington County Fair Board. I volunteered with the Oregon State Bar under the Unlawful Practice of Law Committee, where we examine people that practice law without a license. I was elected to the board of directors of Fort Wayne Community College. I volunteered for advisory boards with the community colleges. I've even served on an advisory board for Clark Community College. I serve on a committee for Oregon State's Family Business Program. I could go down. I was chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm not saying this to be bragging. I mean, most of this stuff is because I was too stupid to say no, and I did all these positions. But what I'm trying to get a point is, I could have easily just said I don't have the time for any of this, and I really probably didn't have the time for any of it. But everything I volunteered for, I took something away from it, and I probably gained more than I ever gave. And so what I'm going to tell you right now has been my secret for success. I don't know if it'll be yours, but I would encourage you to try something outside your box and volunteer for it. And like David said, that it builds those connections, but it shows initiative. It shows that you're willing to learn. And so even in your education, you can pay for education, or you can get an education through volunteering and being a part of an organization. So that would be one takeaway I would encourage people to do, is volunteer for something, be a part of it, because everything I did was unpaid. I didn't receive $1 for it, but I got more than I ever gave.
That's great advice. I think volunteering is awesome. So kind of related to that and about the contacts, what is your advice for students to develop professional contacts while they are still in school, and how can they feel both motivated and confident in that process?
So I'll take that because this comes up, I think, a lot here with the kind of folks we work with. But what I would suggest you do is develop a set of questions that you would use as an informational interview. It should be maybe 8 to 10 questions. All you're going to do is have your set of questions. You'll become confident with your questions. And then you're going to go and ask every single person that hey, do you have a few minutes? Let me talk to you about the type of work you do. What makes that person successful in that type of work? It will help you to hone the types of jobs that are of interest to you and kind of kick out the ones that seem to be kind of a drag. David talked about finance, and that just wasn't his his thing, but he had to try it first, and he had to talk to people about it and do it and kind of get his hands dirty a little bit. And we all have had to do that to some extent. But the more that you can just ask a series of questions, and you can go online, you can get, there's tons of examples about informational interviews. But I would just encourage you, if you're in any groups, you have all of your professors, you have all the people on this call. Some of them are younger, some of them are older. They're all going to give you interesting advice about maybe the past careers that they have had. Church organizations, the job that you have currently that you maybe want to transition out of. There are so many people for you to talk to, but if you have a structured approach, it's just going to make you more confident in asking people questions about what they like or don't like about their particular career path.
That's a great answer, Sarah. And then I would say, only to add on top of that, is be proactive. It's going to take you driving it and you being the one to reach out and take the initiative to have those types of conversations.
People will offer to help you. It's very rare that people say, no, I'm not going to talk to you. It's just super uncommon.
Yeah, I think the only thing I can add to that is, I had an example. My nephew is a chemical engineer. He's in the same boat as you guys. He's going to school, doesn't have any contacts, but he contacts his uncle Dave, that's me. And I'm not very smart, but I have a smart friend who's a chemical engineer. So you're closer than you think probably to developing a network just by using your family and friends. And like I said, since I'm contacting my smart friend Phil, the chemical engineer, he's more than happy to help my nephew whom he's never met. And then, so don't be shy to ask a friend of a friend of a friend, because you never know, that it might lead you to an internship someday.
Right.
I don't have anything to really add. I think they said it all well. But I think most people are afraid to ask for help, but you'll be amazed how many people want to help. So
you just don't know who knows somebody else. So to Dave's point, you don't know who that next person knows. So at the end of every informational interview, what I would also suggest is, can you give me the name of one or two other people that you might suggest I reach out to? Would you be willing to make an email introduction, a phone introduction? Would you mind if I reach out to them directly and used your name? What's the worst they're going to say? No. It's really uncommon. People just don't say no. They rack their brains trying to help you out. Everybody's been in the place of trying to find a job, so they get it.
Yeah, all great advice. I mean, I think that's such a great question. Thank you, Kath, for posing that. For managers, how has managing during remote work or in COVID been different than pre-pandemic, for better or for worse?
It's definitely posed a different set of challenges. Sending people home and keeping level of engagement high and productivity high. I think that for us, it was an experiment of kind of how we make this work for everybody. So we just kept a really high level of communication, daily communication amongst the team, and built in support from the people at home, supporting the people at the office. They dress up on casual Friday and sent, everybody that had to stay in the office a photo like, oh, we're supporting you, we're dressed up, we're not in our jammies. And so that played a really big role too, I think, on everybody's attitudes about some people working from home and some people having to stay in the office. And so it was a challenge. It was fun. We learned a lot. I think it made us stronger.
Yeah, I would have to say education got us through it. Our management teams really broke out into segments and tackled certain issues, because, I had a lot of people look at me going, what do we do what are we going to do? How are we going to survive this? How are we going to get, and I said, look, I've been through probably 5 or 6 really good recessions in our 33 years. And there are certain things, to do to conserve cash, to look at manpower, look at, expenses in certain areas where you can tighten your belt. There are some knee-jerk things that you can do to really move in. But when you're dealing with a pandemic, which I've never experienced before to this level, I don't think anybody had, when you have your own government shutting you down and preventing you from operating efficiently, you have new safety concerns that we didn't have to deal with. You had laws changing by the minute. because governors were using executive orders to a degree that we've never seen in this country. And so you had to be on top of things. And that, I mean, the amount of reading and classes I went through our law firms, through our accounting, to take advantage of that stuff, that got us through it. And quite honestly, there was a lot of association support. So if we belonged to association, we had several business associations that we could lean to. That was helpful, but this was a challenge. Hopefully it's the last one I ever see, because I don't think I got the energy to go through it again. But it was a lesson for my children who are going to be taking over the business, to understand some of the things you first go to and start, knee jerk that you need to get through a recession. But then ultimately you have to learn, and you have to be on top of things, because it's changing at lightning speed, and you have to be on top of it as soon as possible.
Anyone, Dave, did you have anything to add on that?
Having a retail store, yeah, I think all of you out there has seen what we had to go through. Putting up the barriers, putting on masks. I just say, at first, when it first happened, you almost want to put a line in the sand, say, I'm not going to wear masks all day, but then you learn, just follow the law. The law is kind of the boilerplate on what gives you kind of a roadmap on what to do. On a personal level, I had a lot of senior citizen employees who immediately left work because they didn't want to be at risk. And so the biggest hurdle I had was, it's basically down to me and one other employee in her 20s for about a month and a half, until the situation kind of settled a bit, and the old employees were me greatly at the UPS store because I had to, basically come in and work a ton of hours to offset that fear.
I will also add, on a personal level, it's taught me to slow down in life a little bit more. My mother-in-law was one of the first actually to pass from COVID in Oregon. She was the sixth person to die from COVID in Oregon. And it took her in a total of 3 days, she was gone. And quite honestly, I thought, man, we're all going to get this. And we're all going to, if it could take her that quickly. Now she had underlying health conditions that exacerbated the disease and took her quickly. But it was a fearful time. But it was the first time in my life, in my working time, that I actually, I worked from home for 2 to 3 months, and I started evaluating how besides work being number one priority, that family meant something. I always thought it did, but it really came to the forefront when you lose somebody from an illness like that. And so I think I've evaluated and slowed down my life to some degree and realized what's truly important. And I think so that, as bad as this pandemic has been, there's been some good come out of it. In that I think we've learned to be, or at least I have learned to be, a better person.
Yeah, that's a great throw out, and I'm so sorry about that. That's a terrible loss. So this kind of goes along with actually what your responses were, but have mental health factors due to COVID-19, remote work, deaths, or illness in the family affected the quality of work from your workers, as well as the fear?
I would say, not in our, not really in our industry. I think that people pivoted pretty quickly, found a sort of a creative outlet. Maybe it was easier for them to be creative without all the distractions of being in a really busy open office. So there were some benefits to that. The mental health piece has really taken its toll, I think, for us, a lot of the women in our workforce who have children at home. It has really fallen to the women. And not to say that men aren't, good caregivers, but that's just sort of been the experience here, that most of the women are the ones sitting and doing the online schooling. So it's been very beneficial for a number of them that here, at least that I've talked to, when the kids have gone back to school, they've been able to kind of balance out a little bit better or differently than the past. So, but we provide a lot of, we talk a lot about mental health here too. I send out a lot of notices, reminders about taking time off and taking care of people, taking care of themselves, using our employee assistance plan. I'm using the mental health plan through our healthcare. So I'm sending that information out a lot. I probably send it out about every 6 weeks, just as a reminder, because you never know when you're going to catch somebody. So I think, we try to figure that out and try to address the needs of people where they are and when they find themselves in really awful circumstances. So.
Yeah, I've had to be more flexible with staff. I've listened more to their concerns and their anxiety. We've had several people that have contracted the virus, and I was calling them at home, checking on if they need anything, if there's anything I could bring to the house. It's foster a closer family with me and my employees. And I think that's how we survive things. We help each other. So I think that, again, there's some good that comes out, but I think from a management perspective, you got to stop sometimes focusing on the actual business and focus on the people you employ and address those concerns. And I think that will ultimately lead to success across the board.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say that the mental or emotional toll didn't necessarily affect the work, although it affected many of us just in general. But I think if you're fortunate enough to work with a group of people that in a really great culture, I have to echo Ken's sentiments. Our team really pulled together. And as an employer, we were offering, we would order dinner in for our employees to take home with them so they didn't have to worry about making dinner. We had their cars detailed for them one time. We had a snow cone machine come, and it kind of kept spirits up. We did that stuff all throughout the pandemic. And I think it just brought us closer together as a team and kept everybody's focused on positive things. But to say that it didn't have an effect, it definitely did. I just think that we did a good job of combating it to the best of our ability.
Yeah. It's a little different because, I'm the owner of 2 businesses, and I kind of touched on the more elderly employees that I have, but on a personal level, I was surprised at my resilience, not to pat myself on the back, but back in April of last year, I was down to one other employee, and simultaneously I had to shut down a business, right? And it was very, very overwhelming. But then, there's like a quote, I forget who to attribute it to, that hard work is the antidote to sorrow. And so I just found that if I just plugged away at shutting down my old business, that you can get through the day-to-day stuff and not deal with the pain. So yeah, how do you handle that? I don't know. I can only respond from my own personal experience. It's just being resilient, focus on what you can control, and take it day by day. And to touch on what Ken was saying, you do get to stop and smell the roses. Ironically, the other business going out of business, I stayed home and helped my children with their school, and I feel like I got another year of time with hands-on time with my kids. Right, once they reach elementary school, you don't see them as much, but I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, because I also got frustrated a lot with my children during tutoring them. But yeah, these days you can't get them back. And so, I was lucky, ironically, by losing my other business, I had more time to spend with my kids, and they're 12 and 15 and growing up way too fast. So I was blessed in that regard.
Nice. This is we have always had, for the last 7 years, we've had a scavenger hunt here in downtown Camas. And so it's an all-employee scavenger hunt. And so this was the second year, because this was it happened, obviously last April. So this was the second year we
think she might have paused. Maybe she'll come back.
I really want to hear that story.
Me too. I was really excited about it. I love scavenger hunts. Well, we'll give her a few. Nope. Okay. Well, we we have one more question. So
Can you
we'll,
ever call me
I
after
know,
this?
right? No, we'll just Zoom about it because I want to know too. So, let's see. Oh, yep. So she'll pop back on hopefully. But the next question, and then we'll get back to that because it'll be way more exciting. As COVID has caused businesses to close down, do you believe the so-called end of the pandemic will cause businesses created during the pandemic to close down as well? And they put in there as a note, think of the mask industry. Or do you think that they'll be able to scale and do something different, or that the businesses created may not need to go away because we do still have some fear?
That's a really good question. I imagine just like anything, there will be a little bit of it all. There will be some that business owners tend to be really innovative and they make adjustments and do what they need to survive. And so I imagine we'll see some of those make those adjustments and do just fine, and others that may go out of business.
So I'm going to pause on that so that Sarah can finish because
Okay.
we're all dying to hear this scavenger hunt story. Seriously. So
Glad you're back, Sarah.
please.
No, I was just actually just using it as an example, like Josie was just talking about how you pivot. And maybe it does relate to this question as well. I do think that people who have an entrepreneurial spirit will find ways, and David probably can speak to this more than anybody because he's had to think about this and he's now thinking about this again. So probably should just toss it to you, David, to talk about, how you're taking one idea, maybe morphing it into something else. But it's kind of like what we did with our scavenger hunt. We used to do it one way. It's really, really, really important to us. And so we figured out how to do it differently. And I think that where you have a passion for something, you will figure it out. You'll ponder it. You'll make that work.
So the question that we asked while we were waiting for you to come back was, as COVID has caused businesses to close down, do you believe the so-called end of the pandemic will cause businesses created during the pandemic to close down as well? And they said, think of mask industry, but what you answered, the pivot is absolutely the good answer and fits in there. But if you have anything else to add for that.
I just think that maybe kind of what Josie was saying too, or all of the panelists, is that if it's something that, well, it has to be needed, right? And masks, we don't necessarily need them in the same volume, but I will tell you that they are still needed in the medical practices. And now one of the things that we're seeing with innovation, talk about masks, clear masks. There are 3 different varieties of clear masks that have come out. There was a real creepy weirdo version, but we work with audiology practices. And if you're deaf, and many people who are deaf read lips. So if you've got a mask on, you can't read lips. You have no idea what is being said to you. And when you're in the middle of a pandemic, when you're afraid of getting a disease, you're not super excited about taking your mask off. So people kind of came up with a weird version, which very quickly transitioned into another version that still has the same, it still has a seal, but you're able to see the person's lips. And that way, when you're with the audiologist and someone's trying to address your hearing care, you can see their lips move. You can be part of the conversation. And that's a really big deal. And that will live on in the audiology community. So I think people, where they see a need, it'll evolve. And so maybe it's not paper masks, but it'll be something else where that type of medical grade materials will be put into some other usage.
I marvel at our country's ability to adapt. Like how quickly did masks come out? I know initially we were low on masks. How quickly did the United States and capitalism all of a sudden have us be inundated with masks? Now, to answer your question, if all you do is make consumer grade masks and that's all you do, then yeah, you'll die. That's capitalism in a nutshell. But kind of like restaurants now, sit down restaurants, they might not have a chance of making it because they just happen to be in the wrong industry. But for every winner, every loser, there's going to be a winner. That's just the way it works. And So having that diversification, hopefully if you're a mask maker, you also happen to make t-shirts, right? You can move your resources around to capitalize. But, I think post-pandemic, we're not going to see just a massive depression because all of these companies that were enriched are going to go away. It'll just pivot to a new industry. That's just kind of the way it works. We don't see horse and buggies anymore. We see cars, and pretty soon we're only going to see battery cars. And if you only make gas cars, you'll be dead. It's always a moving target.
It
Yeah,
actually,
I was just going to say, I agree with David on the amazed at the ingenuity of this country and how quickly we adapt and can take a bad situation and somehow make it a little bit better. Even when we were trying to learn how to open safely and employ people safely, I took a class on OSHA, and the OSHA inspector was very candid and said, look, we don't know all the answers to how to do that. What we're doing is actually learning from employers and what they're doing and how they're doing it, and we're picking it up. So they were very open about it. I mean, I think people are creative, and this, I don't mean this as a political statement in any way, but I think government tries to step in and help when sometimes I think they hamper. And I think for the most part, most people know how to protect themselves. And across the board, there's a lot of people that, I mean, I have employees that still believe it's a government conspiracy, and others that believe, that it's gonna kill everybody in the world. And somewhere in the middle is the truth. But I think we're slowly reaching a level where we're figuring these things out on our own. And I think at some point we're gonna have to learn to live with coronavirus into the future, and we're gonna have to learn how to protect ourselves, and you can't expect somebody to do it for you all the time.
Yeah. One of the things that I have been really heartened by is back in the 80s and 90s, there were many women who opened private practices, whether in our field it's audiology. And then we really saw that taper off, and there were not as many people feeling the entrepreneurial spirit. They were either going to work in a hospital, or they were either bought by a hospital, or they were going into kind of group practice. And I feel like what we're seeing kind of with this expansion of the gig economy, and I know what we're seeing kind of in our own space, is I'm seeing more women buying private practices. And I really am enthusiastic about seeing this kind of pendulum swing. I think people are maybe realizing that they can take a risk and try it. And that this has been maybe an opportunity for them, for people to see that you can, maybe test it out in a small way, maybe kind of going from food truck to, restaurant, or from restaurant back to food truck. We've seen that as well, is that people are maybe thinking about being their own business leader, and particularly women, and that makes me pretty excited.
So those are the end of the questions that folks had sent in, either through their registration or through here today. So I would say maybe if anybody has any other questions, if they want to raise their hand or put it in the chat, we definitely can ask those. But while we're waiting for that, if there's any other tips or ideas or secrets that any of the four of you would like to give to our students, please feel free while we're waiting to see if we get any questions.
I'll make an offer. I know you talked about contacting or reaching out to us afterwards. But if anybody on this call wants to friend me on LinkedIn, I'll accept your offer, and that's a great way to build a network. I think I have 6,800 connections on LinkedIn currently, and so connecting with me will help you connect to my network as well. And if you want to message me then on LinkedIn, feel free to do that as well. Just reference when you reach out to me, put a message in that you were on this call.
A good call. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will email all the participants too this information, but I'm putting it in the chat as you say it. And actually we had a question come through. So this is from a specific student. My affiliation involvement section in my resume is limited. My experience section is strong. Would you overlook a resume that has limited volunteer experience?
No. It depends. I mean, again, whether it's the reverse too can happen, right? You have lots of volunteer experience and little work experience. The question is, how relevant is it to solving the business problem that I particularly have? So I'm interested, certainly, I sit on boards as well, and I'm interested in people's volunteer experience because, as we discussed, it's, how involved are you in your community? Do you want to build it? And if you're involved in your community, are you also, I assume you're going to be maybe involved in the community, my culture that I have here in the office. So no, it doesn't. I wouldn't overlook that at all.
I was going to make a quick comment in general. So, the four of us volunteered our time to do this, and Ken touched upon volunteering, right? And so now, if I have a title question, I've never met Josie before, but I would want to contact her because of volunteering. So I've created this network just by meeting these people. I don't know if you remember the show The Brady Bunch. That's what it looks like on my screen. I've never met them, but like Josie's and Marcia's little column up there. So I would call her. If there's a title question or an HR question, I'd contact Sarah, and so just this small little reach out by me has already paid dividends because it's grown my contact list. And then there's, I think, 30 of you that were on here at the beginning. If any of you ever wanted to start a small business, I would almost be offended that you didn't ask me because, that's what I'm here for. So, just by this listening in, you've developed a network in a way. And if you just simply wrote me and said, hey, I was on the panel, I have a question about starting my own small business, of course I would answer. So keep doing this sort of stuff. You just never know what's going to hit for you down the road.
That's so true. And if you wonder if we practice what we preach, I have all of their names written down here so that I can connect with them on LinkedIn afterwards. So it really is just, it's really just about, paying attention and taking that initiative at every opportunity.
And bringing up LinkedIn as well. Career Services would be happy to help you with your LinkedIn profile and building that if you want assistance or need assistance with that.
Yeah, don't be camera shy. Put a nice professional picture up on LinkedIn. It definitely makes a difference as well.
Maybe the other thing that I would say as we kind of go through this, if any of you are taking marketing classes, just remember that all the things that you learn in marketing are things that you can apply to yourself. All of them. So kind of the LinkedIn piece is it's kind of how you're forming your outreach plan, how you're, think about branding, maybe do a little, and I talk a lot about, personal branding, but you're branding yourself. And so when you go through that process, it can help you to distill some of the essence of yourself to then be able to answer interview questions that any one of us might pose to you. And kind of goes back to that why you, why now. That's, all of us are in business. When we're talking to potential clients, we all have to answer that question too. Why would you choose us? Well, here's about fuel. Here's why I would say choose my consulting practice. You're having to do that as well. So think about your marketing program.
Right. We have another question. As far as letters of recommendation or references on the resume, which is best and how would I present my letter of recommendation to an employer through the application process or through the interview?
I recommend you can put the letter of recommendation in your resume, attach it to your resume, but I think it's all actually better, and this is from our company's perspective, is to just put down references upon request, or even in the cover letter if you require references, we can send them a letter. The more paperwork we get, the greater chance that we're going to lose something or not. We're not going to need it to some degree too. And if things get too wordy, sometimes that will turn off a recruiter as well. So I think references are great. I'm not belittling that, but I'm just saying initially I think is you can always offer those at either the end of the interview or have that on your resume that you can offer it on request.
Oh, actually, let me tag on to that because this just happened yesterday with, we came down to a finalist candidate for a practice in the East Coast. We asked for the references, 3 references, which is kind of traditional, right? Every single one of them was wrong. Had a wrong contact, had a wrong email, 3 of them all wrong. So here's the deal. When we ask for your references, because we will, and I will always ask for that, please make sure you've contacted them and clarified that the phone number, email, and whatever relationship you have with that person is clearly listed. But it was rather shocking that all 3 of them were a bust. So let me tell you what we did with that candidate. Right?
Yeah, and references are a big deal, and giving them the heads up or asking them to use them as a reference. I called a reference one time who clearly hadn't been contacted by the candidate, and the reference actually didn't have wonderful things to say. He was very hesitant and kind of caught off guard that I was asking about this particular candidate. So make sure you know who you're, what they're going to say about you, and that you get their approval before you put them down. But a reference for me goes a really long way. If I call somebody, if I like you already, or maybe I'm deciding between 2 candidates and your references just can't stop glowing about you, for me, you're getting the job.
I use references also to help get to know the candidate better from somebody else's perspective. So I'll ask questions like, maybe describe this person in 3 words. And I'll ask that of all of their references, just so I can get kind of a sense of consistency of how they're describing that person. So it's a really important thing for me. So, I hope all of you take that pretty seriously.
I would also say that if you don't have personal references from work because you're just starting out, contact some of your professors and get them permission to write a letter of reference for you, or use them as a reference as well. Because I know we in particular, if we're hiring directly out of a university or college, we're gonna want to talk to a professor. So that's another great resource.
All right. Well, let's see. We did have one more. Would you suggest inserting COVID procedure in a business plan if a student is planning to open a certain kind of business?
If you're interacting with the public a lot, I think it makes a lot of sense to promote it and let them know what, so you make a customer feel safe when they're entering your premises. We've been very clear with our employees how, we're trying to protect them on the job, and what we expect from them and what we expect from our clients, and some of the procedures. So I think it can be part of a business plan. Hopefully it won't be something we'll have to focus completely on in the near, in the going future, but I think it will always be, safety will always be a concern.
In our business, so I review student business plans for audiology practices every year. And where we have seen it, or where I look for it, is there's cost of goods associated with your PPE, but also you have less, you can have less patients per hour. So it's reducing your revenue. So you do have to make some slight adjustments to your business plan. So that's where we see it. So it depends on obviously the business plan that you have and what kind of customer, or whatever your revenue model is. But at least in the medical world, there is a component of that has to be incorporated.
Great answers. Thank you. So that was the last question that we have. So I'm not sure, we did have the reporter from the Indy. I'm not sure if he has any questions for you and wants to use this last few minutes to do that. I'll see if he pops on in a few seconds. Or if you have any questions or last minute suggestions.
I've been here. I just wasn't talking at all. I wanted to let them finish. It's been great to hear from you guys. again, I just wanted to let you guys do your own thing. I've been taking notes here, and I've also been I want to make sure with Heather that it was okay to record everyone. So, but yeah, I don't have any further questions. I think I have more than enough. Okay, my dog decides to move now. I think someone else had a question in the chat. I'm not sure what that was, but hey. But yeah, it's been great to hear from you guys. I think I can read this piece now. Not sure if you guys have any questions for me or anything. I'm just a student. I don't really, not really anything special right now. But if you guys have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Hey, you're so much more than just a student. Give yourself some more credit.
I take classes a quarter. It's nothing major.
Heather, can I jump in for a second?
Please, Hal. Yeah.
So I just want to emphasize that, thanks again to Ken, Sarah, Josie, and Dave. There are going on at any point throughout the school year, there are similar activities to this. A lot of wonderful ones are planned through career services. The STEM team has a number of interactions where they'll have presentations and other opportunities where they have speakers and panelists. The currently ongoing Entrepreneurship Pitch Fest is inviting people to speak and from the community and share their perspectives. So the message is just for you all to really start by looking within the college and turning to your counselors and great people like Heather and Kath Keen to hear of what else is going on. Another person on this call earlier, or maybe she's still on, is Sherry Turgeson. There's been some great financial wellness presentations. And just throughout the campus, there are more resources than you may realize. And so by turning to, again, your network, you're going to learn of some nice, wonderful opportunities to really learn and strengthen your skill set, and particularly this, as we're talking about, your soft skill set, which really can be the difference to great success.
Great throughout, Hal. That's so true. And anytime you are looking for resources, I will say that every Tuesday in your inbox, you will get a Penguin Digest. And that has a lot of updates from many departments, but also multiple of our student success workshops. We definitely encourage you to attend, and any other events that happen to be in there, and check the website. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. So any other? Okay.
Just to add to all of that, I want to say thanks to Hal and the foundation for helping to connect us with our speakers and our alumni. And to the students in the room, thank you so much for your time and attention. I imagine that you feel energized right now the way that I do. To our employer panelists, Josie and David and Sarah and Ken, I love hearing your stories and advice. I've taken so many notes that I will in turn share with students. And I just want to say this really helps to normalize thinking about that future job search process and the idea of needing to pivot and being able to pivot and career opportunities and just feeling enthusiastic about the future. So thank you for your time and attention.
Yes, I would like to second that for sure. Thank you, Kath. So with that, do any of you have any last minute things you'd like to put in there in the last few minutes? Or
thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm probably gonna have to jump off. Unfortunately, I have our company board meeting I have to go to in a minute, but I did want to thank everybody for being a part of allowing me to be a part of the panel. And I'll promise you, if you message me on LinkedIn, I will connect with you. And I appreciate the other panelists for being a part of this as well. So I just want to say bye and thank you again very much.
Thank you, Ken.
And and to the students, utilize your college, utilize your institution. It's got an outstanding reputation. And the people that work for it, I know, care about you and want you to succeed. So reach out to the college and utilize it to its full extent. That's my parting words. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.
I just wanted to clarify that to our speakers that in case I do use any piece from Okay. In case I do use any piece from this panel, I will be contacting you first and just so I can get your permission. It's something that we do, and we really emphasize journalistic ethics here at the Indy. And so I just want to clarify that for you guys.
Thank you, Troy.
All right. Well, with that, I'll be in contact with the three of you panelists, and then of course Ken, just to get the correct contact information so that I can send that out along with the recording of this to all of the participants, even folks who didn't show up, even though they did register, something may have come up. So definitely be looking for that email from me.
Very good. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you and your time.
Bye.
Thank you, students, for all your great questions.
Yes, wonderful questions. Thank you to the students for sure.
I actually did have one question real quick.
Yeah.
And it's, did anyone have any books that you would recommend, say like either for business or like starting a business?
Oh, starting a business. Oh, you know, I don't know. David probably said he's the expert in this area, but I think the E-Myth is a good business book, business startup book. It's an old one. I don't know if it was probably written in the 90s, probably, by Michael Gerber. I like that book.
I don't know. I don't really have a book per se. My general advice is, you read a lot of stuff. You can read about Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, whomever, but don't be a disciple. Take the good qualities that they have, retain them, and reject the bad ones. You could say Steve Jobs was a wonderful, detail-oriented, creative mind, but he was a horrible father. Well, you don't want to be Steve Jobs when you grow up. You want to be take the positive attributes that he has, and just kind of remember that about everyone. Find little chunks of advice, the positives, but don't be a clone. Don't be a disciple. Just kind of grow with the good qualities that each of these teachers have. It's unlimited. It's not just in books. It's YouTube. I mean, hundreds of the greatest experts you could ever want to associate with, way smarter than me, all for free. And like I said, you don't have to regurgitate what they say, but just take the positive things that they have to say and keep that in your little mini portfolio.
Yeah, and I would say for me, it's not specific to starting a business, but it definitely motivated and encouraged and inspired me. And it was just Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I recommended it. It was a great book.
Great suggestion. Thank you. And good last minute question there. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed that in the chat. All right. Well, again, thanks everybody for your participation. We greatly appreciate you spending your 2 hours with us. And I will email out the contact info. Austin, you just put that in the chat, in an email to everybody later today. All right. Thanks, folks. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.